Episode 34. We're late, and we haven't got a guest. This should be fun then.
This is Partners in Crime with Adam Croft and Robert Dawes.
Hello, my little bobbykins.
Hello there, happy Saturdays, how are you?
Yes, I'm not too bad. How are you? It probably will be Saturday by the time this goes out as well.
Oh, yes, indeed. Well, there we are. Yeah, I'm very well. As you say, it's just us on our own. If it was an Agatha Christie novel, it would be called And Then There Were Two.
Well, we did it once before, didn't we? We do like to hear from our listeners and to hear what they want us to do. And one of the suggestions that was quite popular was doing an episode of just us and interviewing each other. And we did it a few episodes back. And we thought, well, we'll give it a go. You know, we like to give the listeners what they want. And it's become one of our most popular episodes. So
how did that happen?
I don't know, but in amongst all of the A-listers we've had recently, which we had Tess Gerritsen, we've had Kate Rose, we had Val McDermid, we've got another A-lister next week as well.
Yes, I'm looking forward to that very much indeed.
None other than Linda LaPlante will be joining us on the show next week. So we thought, well, we'll pull out some real A-listers for this episode. So, yes, Messrs. at Croft and Dawes.
Yes, B- in my case, perhaps, but thank you very much indeed.
Well, and we've got a lot to talk about as well, because I finished my latest book last week, so I've actually had some time to read books and to watch things and actually have a bit of time to myself after.
What's that like? I mean, it's an extraordinary thing. I write my book so slowly because I have to fit it into so many other things. But you get up every day and you write. This is your profession. You don't actually. Yeah. You're like me, go out and clean windows of a morning and do countless other things. You get up, you write your books, you research the next one, you market your books. It's a full-time industry, craft, an art form. So when you do get a little bit of downtime, that must be wonderful. So you what you're saying is you relish it.
Well, yeah, and I don't know what to do with it. That's the problem. Every time I finish a book and I have a couple of days and I just think I'm bored, and I then start the next one.
Just look at the news. That will keep you. Keep you angry. And
I've no shortage of ideas. That's a good thing.
No, that's true.
Yeah, I do. When I've got a book on, I try and get it written very quickly. Normally a few weeks. It will take about a month, something like that, and I'll just hammer my way through it, because otherwise I've had ones where I've written them and I've had a rest and I've gone back and I forget who the characters are. They end up changing name halfway through, or I bring somebody back who's already died because I've forgotten I've killed them off. So I find
Well, you have to immerse yourself in that world again. I mean, I can relate to that, absolutely. It happens to me. If I have a gap in writing a book, you have to go back, you have to immerse yourself in the world again. You have to remember where it was going. I've got copious notes, and I, like yourself, and most writers, I guess, I've got notepads and bits of scraps of paper and etchings on the wall, and things blue tacked with with little notes saying what. But you have to then get back into that state where you had a pattern going, you had an onward momentum, and you stop. Off you go to do something else, or whatever. You come back, and it's quite hard to pick up the reins again. I find anyway. You do it eventually, of course, but it's quite tough.
Well, that's why I just plough on and get it done as quickly as possible. And every time I'm writing a book, I'm thinking, God, I've got to get this bloody book finished, which pushes me on to finish it. And then once I've finished and I've got nothing to do, I think, I'm bored now, I better write another book. So that's kind of...
You do write with great speed, and you'd think it would, listeners, you'd think it would affect the quality, and it doesn't, I have to say.
They're rubbish, however I write them.
I think you probably... Yes, I think writing quickly really does serve you, very well indeed.
Oh, yeah, well, my worst books are the ones that have taken me the longest to write. But I did finish reading Val McDermid's Insidious Intent this week, so I now know what that twist is at the end.
We're still keeping it quick. This is like a long-running mystery in itself,
Val has put a letter at the end which does ask readers, very much in the Mousetrap style, not to reveal the ending, which is wise. But I agree with everyone else when I say, how is she gonna resolve that in the next book? That'd be very interesting to find out.
Because she is Val McDermid,
and that's why everyone's going to rush out and buy the next one.
Well,
it's a hell of an
they'd be rushing out anyway, but I mean, it certainly is a double incentive.
Well, not only is it a hell of an ending, it's a hell of a start to the book as well. It's the initial sentence in this book I love. Chapter 1, sentence 1. I'll start again. If Catherine McCormick had known she had less than 3 weeks to live, she might have made more of an effort to enjoy Suzanne's wedding. It's a nice little pull in there.
You missed the letter at the beginning of the book asking you not to actually say that.
Oh, damn. Sorry, Val. But I've read that, and I've moved on to another previous guest of ours, David Marks, first Hector McAvoy book. I think it's like Hector with a slight cough.
Yes, I'm getting to meet him next week, actually. I'm really looking forward to it. Yes, we're up at the Morecambe and Vice Crime Festival, and he's on a panel.
He's a lovely chap, very funny.
Yeah, yes, he was, wasn't he?
As you might see by the state of this book, it's been in the bath twice this week.
Listeners, if you were sitting where I'm sitting and you saw the state of this book,
I might have to put a picture of it on Twitter.
When you've been to that jumble sale or that bazaar at the village hall, and there are all these second-hand books that have all been in baths at different times in their.
The last time it fell in the bath was 3 days ago. Feel that?
Yeah,
that is.
Good grief, put it in the spin dryer.
That's still pretty soggy, isn't it?
It's very soggy.
It was 3 days ago that fell in.
Oh, that's quite. Yes, his pages are moist.
Yeah, 3 days. I reckon I could probably still squeeze drops out of that if I squeeze it hard enough. But yeah, I mean, the bath is the only time I actually get to read. I'm going to share this with you, dear listeners. I have a young child, and my wife also works at home with me. So actually, locking yourself in a room. And having that nice sanctuary of the bath is the only time I really get to read. So, yes, I did. I've had it on the side of the bath and knocked it in twice. I've never knocked a single book in the bath in my life, or any object of any sort. But yeah, this book went in twice. And the second time round, my phone went in with it.
Oh,
so that
no.
was, fortunately, it's a waterproof phone, so no damage was done. But yeah, it was.
Well, you'll be fighting the space in your bath because it's full of plastic ducks and yellow submarines.
Yeah, it is. So, little fishing rods.
You did well to find it under the copious number of bubbles.
Well, I use this little fishing rod. I've got it out with that. So, but yeah, it's a brilliant book, as all David's are. Dark Winter. That's called the first one. It's I can't think how to describe it really. It kind of. It just pulls you along. It's not your conventional twisty turny, but it's the way it's written is unique, and it pulls you along with it, and you don't realise that you're reading a book. If that makes any sense.
The way that the eccentricity and the speed of his main protagonist does influence the way that some of the stories unfold, because you're looking at it through Hector's eyes very much, and it is a different rhythm, and it is a different speed, and I find it engrossing. I think it's you know what I think about David's writing.
Well, he's a unique detective as well, McAvoy. He's there's no one quite like him.
No, there isn't. Well, we mentioned that when we talked to him, and I think that does set his books very much apart in as reads crime fiction, reads stories, novels, what have you. But as you say, as a person, I mean, he could have another life as a stand-up comedian.
Yes,
I think.
Yeah.
I'd certainly pay tickets to go and see him at the Comedy Store. In the meantime, I'm going to Morecambe.
Well, I think I did send him a message actually saying I'm reading Dark Winter and I've only got one criticism of it. He said, "What's that?" I said, "It's not waterproof."
Well, they made phones. Your phone's waterproof, I take it.
The phone is waterproof, thankfully, yeah, because the phone is worth considerably more than the book. But,
yes. But, I've got a book here. Well, listen,
that's a very noisy book you've got.
That's a very noisy book.
Interactive.
Well, it's. I managed to track down, because I couldn't find it, a Reginald Hill. So, and I never read Reginald Hill before. I'd seen him very often on television. His characters, of course, in Dale and Pasco. But this was a recommendation by Val McDermid, who said it was sort of a very important book when she was beginning to write. And I can see why. It's absolutely fantastic. I mean, I'd never read a D. Allen Pascoe before. I used to see them, and I had the great pleasure of working with not actually I never did a Dial and Pascoe, but I had the great pleasure of working with Warren Clarke on many occasions, and was deeply fond of him. He was an extraordinary man and an extraordinary actor. But here we are. It's on Beulah Height, and it's a terrific read. I'll just read you the bump on the back, as I normally do. They moved everyone out of Dendale that long hot summer 15 years ago. They needed a new reservoir, and an old community seemed a cheap price to pay. They even dug up the dead and moved them too. But for inhabitants of the valley, they couldn't move, for no one knew where they were. 3 little girls had gone missing, and the prime suspect in their disappearance, Benny Lightfoot. This was Andy Dale's worst case, and now, 15 years on, he looks set to relive it. It's another long, hot summer. A child goes missing in the next valley, and old fears arise as someone sprays the deadly message on the wall of Danby. Benny's back.
Ooh, well, I think the atmosphere of that description was without doubt accentuated by the ringing of my doorbell in the background as you were reading it. So I think that added a certain something to it.
I'll take any supporting sound effects I can take. I can get.
We've got all the Foley here.
But it's a fantastic read, and he's obviously a wonderful writer that I've missed out on up to now, and I'm sure to the converted. Many of you probably have read Reginald Hill. No longer with us, of course, but I am looking forward to my next.
You don't have to say you like it, then. He's not here to argue, is he?
You don't know. I'm a very spiritual person.
Well, maybe podcasts do cross into the not the underworld. That's not the word I'm looking for, is it?
Yes, after podcast. Afterlife.
Yes.
Afterlife. Well, anyway, I mean, it's a fantastic book, so I would really recommend it. If you haven't read Reginald Hill, and don't just take my advice for it. Val McDermid recommended this book, and I think it's a great novel and a great first book to read to get into Reginald Hill's writing, I'm sure.
Yeah, Reginald Hill on Beulah Height. My recommendations: Val McDermid's Insidious Intent and David Mark's Dark Winter. You can get those all on Kobo. Head over to kobo.com, and as a listener to Partners in Crime, if you enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout, they'll give you 90% off if it's your first purchase. At this point, we would normally play our noise and go into an interview. But we don't have one, and normally we'd have a cup of tea or coffee beforehand, but because we're running right through and doing this whole thing live, we've brought the teapot up. So would you like a top up, Mr. Dawes?
Yes, please. Thank you very much indeed.
Top your tea up there.
Now, there's nothing crime about this. When I arrived, Adam went into a great detail about how he sourced...
This is tea, by the way. I'm not having a wee.
This is... don't know why I'm laughing. No, it went into great detail about how he got this particular tea. It is a green tea. It is a fine tea. It is a delicate tea, and he's got a special teapot.
Yeah.
Which did you buy that in the
No,
market?
I had this anyway.
You had that anyway. I see. And it is quite delicious. You found the tea in a stall in Milton Keynes.
Yes, in Milton Keynes Shopping Centre. There's a chap in a great big bright red teapot.
Yes.
It's basically like a little pop-up bar, but for tea. And
this is going to end up in one of your novels somewhere along the line.
I thought I'd just pop in and have a cup of tea, and next thing I knew, I was walking away with bags full of the stuff. So
well, it's quite nice. And
Mr. Teapot in Milton Keynes. Highly recommend.
There we are.
We've not done a restaurant review in a while, have we?
No, we haven't.
So,
we only do restaurant reviews for restaurants in Aberdeen. You might have noticed.
Yes, we should get Hugh on to do another one.
We should get Hugh on. Well, actually, now there's a nice little segue into something, because Hugh, of course, is Hugh Fraser. We're talking about, the wonderful actor and a thriller writer who writes a wonderful series of books about a female contract killer, a hit woman, set in the 1960s, and we've recommended them very often. The first of which I think is Harm, and again,
Harm, Threat and Malice, I think.
Yes, Harm, Threat and Malice, and there's another one coming out shortly. 1960s, full of wonderful atmosphere, full of just thrills and spills and danger. But there is someone else in that market as well, in a contemporary way, so you can't begin to compare with Hugh's wonderful books. These are another set of books, and I have just read the first novella. They are, actual fact, 4 novellas, and the first one is called Codename Villanelle. Now, if this is ringing bells to anyone in the UK or America, the name Villanelle, of course, that is because Codename Villanelle is the basis for the hit TV series, which we've already talked about on the podcast, called Killing Eve. So I'm starting from the book perspective on this. It's written by Luke Jennings, who is a London-based author and journalist who has written for The Observer, Vanity Fair, New Yorker and Time. He's the author of other books, Blood Knots, shortlisted for the Samuel Johnson and William Hill prizes, and the Booker Prize nominated Atlantic. With his daughter Laura, he wrote the teenage stage school novels Stars and Stars Stealing the Show. Now, Codename Villanelle has, as I just said, been adapted for television in Killing Eve, and it is taking the world by storm. It is certainly taking my sitting room by storm, because I have just watched the entire series on one wonderful binge journey and loved every second of it. I am now writing, I wish I was, my God. I am now reading the first novella on which it is based, Codename Villanelle. It is available on Kobo, by the way, just in case you're interested. And I'm enjoying that, even though I know what's going to happen. It's, again, like, all television adaptations, they are very good in their own right, if they're very good, and they follow the story up to a point, but they are very different. And so it really is worth, I think, reading the books as well in this particular case. The novels follow the thrilling, just in case you haven't seen it or read it, the novels follow the thrilling duel between Villanelle, an elite female assassin, and Eva Polastri, the MI5. It's got MI6 in my notes here, but I think she's MI5, or should be MI5? MI6, MI5 agent. I think she was MI5. They certainly show the MI5 building and not the MI6. So anyway, agent who is tasked with hunting her down. These little details worry me. And anyway, wonderful reviews for it, for both the books and for the television. A Russian orphan. She's I won't go into this. She's a perfect assassin. It's got here, ruthlessly trained, given a new life, new names, new faces, whichever fits. Her paymasters call themselves the 12, but she knows nothing of them. Constantine is the man who saved her, and the one she answers to. She is Villanelle, without conscience, without guilt, without weakness. Eva Polastri is the woman who hunts her, until one error of judgment costs her everything. Then stopping a ruthless assassin becomes more than her job. Yes, you know what I'm going to say next. It becomes personal. Well, the television is quite extraordinary, a brilliant cast.
It's on my list. I'm going to start watching it tonight. It's on my Sky box.
Again, I envy you, because you're going to start fresh to this and you're going to be like me. It's an extraordinary piece. It plays with all sorts of different... I can't even begin to describe it. It's a little bit like the sort of thing that Tarantino occasionally does. Subverts the genre, subverts the story, and things come from different ways. It is full of dark humour. It's quite violent. Well, to put it mildly, it's very violent. I'm just talking to the Paul Kennington, who's the wonderful stuntman on it, and is an old friend, and about it. The stunts are, of course, with Mr. Kennington doing them, extraordinarily well done, but the cast is superb. Everyone knows Sandra Oh, a wonderful actress. She's just won an Emmy, I think, for her performance in this particular series. And all the way down, you have got Fiona Shaw being wonderful. You've got David Haig at his, twinkly-eyed, my bark is worse than my bite best. You have lots of wonderful newcomers in the cast as well, and you have this other performance from Jodie Cromer, which is just extraordinary. I've seen 2 portrayals of psychopaths on television in recent months. Both, I think, were superlative. Alex Jennings in Unforgotten was one, and Jodie Cromer as Villanelle is another. It's an extraordinary performance. She manages to this terrible, ruthless, absolutely empathyless, compassionless psychopath. She sort of draws you in, And you start off by wondering why other people sort of charmed by her, and they are charmed by her, and they fall under her particular spell, usually just seconds before she sticks a knife into their throat, and various other things that she does. Well, actually, in the middle of the forehead, but again, I don't want to do any spoiling. But it is a wonderful series, superbly directed. It's a co-BBC American production. And it travels at great pace, great speed, and it just has to be watched. But as I say, I'm reading the first of the novellas now, and I'm halfway through, and I'm very glad I am, because it doesn't, for me, I've seen the series, so I know what's coming, but it adds so many different layers to the actual story that it's well worth getting that and downloading that from, what's the name of the company again? Cobra.
Oh, that one, yes.
Overcob.
Well, Killing Eve then.
Yes.
I'm going to start watching that tonight. Available on BBC iPlayer in the UK and elsewhere as well in foreign climes. I think the BBC iPlayer is also available in some places, and as you say, it's a co-production with a US company, so availability in the States should also be good.
Well, I think I'm pretty sure it's already been out in the States, but anyway, you might have guessed it, I quite liked it.
I can't wait. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to get onto that tonight. I finished watching the second season of Glitch, a programme that I spoke about on the podcast a few weeks back,
which I've not seen.
Not really kind of crime. It is crime, but not in the conventional sense. It's kind of genreless, but I suppose it's a thriller series about some people who have died years ago and end up coming out of their graves one night, and they're not ghosts, they're not zombies, they are alive again. They are as they were before they died, and some of these people have been dead well over 100 years. And it's a kind of sort of medical scientific thriller, I suppose. There's a doctor who's been in league with a local pharmaceuticals company, and they've done some kind of odd research experiment bringing these people back to life, and you're not quite sure who's doing things for the right reasons and not, and it's very good. I've watched I finished watching the second season earlier this week, and perhaps it went on a bit longer than it needed to. I'm not entirely sure they had the ending planned when they started writing it. I enjoyed it. It's a nice, good, safe watch, which is a nice segue, because the other thing I've been watching on Netflix is Safe, a Harlan Coben series that I think he wrote specifically for Netflix, I believe, set in the UK. It's an 8-parter about a man whose daughter goes missing, and his attempts to try and find her, not knowing who he can trust, and the things that he discovers along the way about her, about his neighbours, and about his community. It's kind of a bit Broadchurchy, I suppose, in that sense, but with all the Harlan Coben pace and energy you'd expect. It's starring Michael, I think his name's Michael C. Clarke, is that his name? Dexter.
Oh,
he's best known as.
Yes.
Playing an Englishman with an accent which I wasn't sure whether I liked his English accent or not. And I think it's because I've watched all of Dexter and I know that he is American. He's as American as they come, and I think because I knew he was putting the accent on, I was a bit sceptical about it. I think if this was the first thing I'd seen him in, I probably would have thought he was British.
Yes.
I probably would have believed it.
I've not seen it, and it's always a definite call actually taking on accents and what have you. And
especially when he's so well known. That's the thing. Everyone knows he's American, and everyone's going to be looking and watching the accent rather than the actual program itself.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one thing having an American actor in it. That's not a problem, but it's always a nice surprise when you then look up the actor and you go, Christ, they're American. I didn't know that. The accent was so convincing. I think if he was an unknown, that would have been the case, but because I knew, it kind of spoilt it a little bit.
Well, you've touched on something that's quite contentious anyway, because you've got an awful lot of British actors who work in the States and play Americans. The latest is Alan Cummings. I guess he's made a very successful cross-Atlantic journey.
Look at House. That was
House and Hugh, Hugh Laurie and what have you.
And what's the other one? The one that was on Channel 4. Massive American spy thing.
Oh, that's Matthew Rhys.
No,
Americans.
No,
He's just won an Emmy. He's a wonderful actor.
Oh, a massive series. I can't think of the name of it now. Damien, what's his face? Damien Lewis.
Oh, yes, that was Homeland.
Homeland, that's the one. Yes, and he played an American in that.
Yes, well, it's sort of understood, and I don't really. I mean, the English can get very, very British. I mean, can get very picky about it, and I understand it. If an accent isn't authentic, or you don't really believe in it, again, we come up with this, then you sort of disengage with the story because there's a level that you just don't believe in it. Now, I've not seen Michael C. Hall's performance.
Michael C. Hall, and that's the one, not Clark. Yes,
Michael C. Hall, and he's. I mean, I just know him as a fantastic actor from 6 Feet Under, which has to be one of the finest drama series I've ever seen, and to Dexter, which was again phenomenal and great. So I've not really seen it, but I can understand how it can just distance you from a story if you don't quite believe a person is who they say they are.
Well, no, I believe absolutely, and the accent is very, very good. And I think if I was just listening to it and not watching it, didn't realise it was him, I think I would be completely convinced by the accent. I think it's because I know he's American, and in my head I know he's putting on the accent. But I think it's easier for English people to do an American accent, because the thing is, with a lot of American dramas, I mean, I'm led to believe that a lot of American actors, because obviously America's a massive place and there are lots and lots of different regional accents, that there is this kind of vague sort of Midwestern American accent which is done for a lot of films and a lot of TV series that don't have a specific geographic location. So a large percentage of American actors will not be doing their actual accent anyway in films and TV. They have a film TV accent, which is kind of locationless. And that is that kind of what we call, in inverted commas, American accent, we call over here, is basically what we're doing. Whereas the other way round, Britain is very different. We're very kind of regional in that sense, and there are lots of accents, and there's not a British accent as such.
Well, there is a now this is quite interesting, because I agree with you, but it does happen over here. My wife was born on the Wirral, and whenever I do a Yorkshire accent, she can be. She's never anything less than supportive and loving, but she does pull a certain face. And I say, "What's that?" She said, "Well, that's your all-purpose Rada Northern." And I go, "Well, yeah, but it's all right." And she says, "Well, which part of the north are you from?" But I say, "Well, I'm sort of over there on the left."
I've lived all over. I've travelled.
Yeah, well, exactly. But the thing is, and it must be the same in the States, but the variation in accents in this country is huge, from village to village.
Yeah.
We're in Bedfordshire at the moment, and there is a Bedfordshire accent. It's a particular sort of.
It's this one.
It's well, yes.
Because I've never left. Well, I have left Bedfordshire, but in terms of living, I've never left Bedfordshire.
You've not got much of an accent. There is a Bedfordshire twang or whatever. There are lots of different, from village to village, certainly from county to county. There are great variations in accent, and of course, everyone sort of is very aware when anyone is sort of pretending to be. If you're doing a play or whatever that's set in Norfolk, you've got to try and get it right. And if you don't, people from Norfolk are going to sort of do what you have just said you felt like doing with that series. You sort of distance yourself a little bit from it. But anyway, it's not a crime.
it just kind of pulls you out of believing slightly, because it's like when the old rule about writing is to write in, don't use bigger words than you need to, don't use overcomplicated sentences, because the reader needs to forget they're reading. And it's the same with the TV series. I think the viewer needs to forget they're watching something and needs to be immersed in it. And that, for me, the accent was brilliant. The problem is clearly with me, because I've seen him in other things and can't get over the fact personally myself that
but has that stopped you?
So,
here's the question: has it stopped you watching the series?
No, not at all. No, so it's a great series. It's a superb performance by Michael C. Hall as well, and by everybody in it, and I think it's really enjoyable, and I heartily recommend it on Netflix. Safe, a Harlan Coben series. It's not sport my enjoyment. It's just an interesting thing. I thought that I, in my head, couldn't quite reconcile the fact that I knew he was acting, even though when I'm watching everything, I know they're acting. But I just thought it was quite an interesting psychological thing, really, from a viewer's perspective. Well,
as a person that writes interesting psychological things, you've just finished writing your latest thing. What's it called?
I'm not going to say just yet, actually. Nothing is definite until it's definite, but yes, I have finished.
You did show me. But of course, I have forgotten in the last 10 minutes what it's actually
I showed
called.
you a cover, which is likely to be the cover and is likely to be the title, but not definite yet. But I will, of course, tell the podcast guests. It is a psychological thriller, and would be out probably end of October, actually, about quite quickly. So yeah.
Have you enjoyed writing it?
Do you know what I have? It's not been too bad. The previous book took me forever. It took me about 6 or 7 months and was a real slog. But this one I planned very, very carefully in great detail. So it's just a case of kind of getting the words down. So it wasn't too bad.
Oh, excellent. So what we've covered today, Val McDermott, we've covered David Mark, we've covered Reginald Hill, we've covered various programmes with or without accents. It is an extraordinary thing, this crime writing, crime fiction sort of field, really. And every week we get lots of people sort of emailing and saying, and thanks very much for that, by the way. It's always greatly appreciated.
Yes.
Greatly appreciated. But one of the big things, of course, that you say are these podcasts for true crime. True crime is absolutely huge. So I don't know whether any of our listeners actually, when they're not listening about the fiction side of it, are tuned into. Can you say tuned into a podcast, or digital and whatever?
I don't know.
I suppose sweet old-fashioned.
Switched on.
Yeah, switched
Pressed
on.
play.
Yes, uploaded, downloaded, side-loaded, or whatever it is to get it on the thing. But they're absolutely huge. And in fact, there was a case I was reading about yesterday where there is a murder in California, and the police detectives who've been searching for this man who murdered his wife and then promptly disappeared with $600,000. He was a very wealthy man. Murdered his wife and completely disappeared. They've started a podcast to raise people's awareness of the man in question, because they are determined to actually bring him to justice. And that's the first time I've heard of a podcast being used by the detectives in the case to actually track, to influence an ongoing murder investigation.
So it's an ongoing live true crime podcast.
Yes, so they talk about the case, they talk about the details of the case, they talk about where they are at the moment. I mean, it really is opening the door. I mean, probably not to everything, understandably, but they are quite... It's the equivalent, I suppose, of the old wanted dead or alive posters going up all across the West, but on podcasts. It's a modern day equivalent of that, though. And on the website, if you go in to download the weekly podcast, there is the accused, the fugitive, his picture or whatever, in various guises. So it's keeping an old case in the public mind and showing that they are determined to actually catch him, and using, the latest techniques to do so. So that is the first time I've heard of that happening, and I wonder whether it will start happening over here. It used to happen. There used to be a television programme in the UK with a presenter called Shaw Taylor. It was on every Sunday lunchtime. What was it called now? People will know. And he used to come from Scotland Yard. He didn't, of course. I mean, it was a television studio somewhere in London. But, it purported to come from the offices of Scotland Yard. And Shaw Taylor actually bringing you up to date. It was like a crime watch, really. The first crime watch with, events and stories and in investigations, robbery and fraud and murder, of course. So I suppose this is just a modern day phenomenon of that. The podcast that is in actual fact part of an ongoing murder.
It's a changing medium.
Yes,
Same information, changing medium.
Well, I think we'll stick to fiction, don't you?
I think it's probably safer, yes. And we do take all of your suggestions. We read all of your emails, and lots of suggestions coming through for guests. We are absolutely looking at all of those and trying to get those people on. A large number of our guests are because of listener suggestions.
Yes, they are.
So thank you very much for those. Please do keep them coming in. Email address is hello@partnersincrime.online. We're on Twitter @CrimeFicPodcast, and on Facebook, facebook.com/partnersincrime-podcast. If you liked any of the books we've been talking about today, or if you want to get some of ours, maybe, hint, hint, please, then head over to kobo.com, find the book that you want, which of course is an Adam Croft one, enter the promo code CRIME at the checkout, and if it's your first Kobo purchase, then the lovely folk at Kobo, our delightful sponsors, will give you 90% off of that book. It had to come out, didn't it?
No, we see, I've been very good.
Yeah,
I've gone through about 10 podcasts without a single whistle. And even that wasn't up to scratch.
It had to come back at some point.
It did. Well, there we are. Oh, that's the wrong kind of whistle entirely. Okay, so
we've got a good one next week.
Who is the prime suspect again?
Linda LaPlante is our guest next week, so we're very much looking forward to speaking to her, talking about her books, as you say, which became the Prime Suspect TV series, the Jane Tennyson books, and lots of other things. I've read a lot of her books, and she was an author that I was reading at the time that I started thinking up my first book as well, so she's got a lot to answer for.
Well, she has. She will not escape blame on that front.
No, her and Stephen Booth have got a lot to answer for.
Well, I'm looking forward to speaking to her because I'm a huge admirer of her work, both in novel form and on television. But I'll also be interested in talking to about how she made the transfer from being an actor herself to a best-selling writer. So that's Linda LaPlante next week.
You're looking for some tips?
Oh, God, yes. Always.
If you've got any questions you want us to ask Linda, then do send them in and we will put them to her.
And this is a lovely tea, by the way. It's a green tea. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, the pot is empty. It's, cup's empty as well.
Okay, so shall we look for some PG tips? Oh, that was terrible.
Partners in Crime was presented by Adam Croft and Robert Dawes and produced by Adam Croft. The theme tune was by the Caesareans. The Partners in Crime logo and imagery were designed by Stuart Bache. Partners in Crime is sponsored by Kobo, your favourite local bookshop, perfected.